My father gave our family business to my sister's husband because he was more able. A year later, he was arrested for fraud. I, 32 meters, grew up in a family where our business was everything. My father, 65 meters, started a small manufacturing company in our garage and slowly built it into a successful local business. From a young age, I was told that one day I'd take over. I studied business in college, worked part-time at the company during school, and joined full-time right after graduation. For the past 10 years, I've been working long hours trying to prove myself, but no matter what I do, it's never enough for my father. He's always criticizing my decisions and questioning my judgment. Things got worse when my sister, 34, married Jake, 35 meters, 5 years ago. Jake has an MBA and worked for a mid-sized accounting firm. From day one, my father was impressed by him. He constantly praised Jake's ideas, even on topics Jake knew little about. Jake started hanging around the shop more, sitting in on meetings and offering his opinions. My father often implemented Jake's suggestions over mine. It didn't matter that I had years of hands-on experience while Jake was just speculating based on general business theories. 3 years ago, we were deciding whether to expand our product line. I spent weeks researching and put together a proposal showing it was too risky. Jake looked at it for an hour and said we should go for it. My father overruled me and followed Jake's advice. We ended up wasting money on inventory that didn't sell. Last year, I negotiated a deal with a supplier that would have saved us 10% on costs. Jake said he thought he could do better. My father let him take over the negotiations. In the end, Jake only got a 7% reduction, but my father praised him for his superior negotiating skills. 6 months ago, we launched a new product. I led the team that developed it. At the launch event, my father barely acknowledged my role and instead had Jake give a speech about the visionary leadership that made it possible. Throughout all this, my sister has always taken Jake's side, even when it's clear he's wrong. She defends him and tells me I'm just jealous. She seems to have forgotten all the times I stood up for her when we were kids. Despite all this, I kept working hard and hoping my father would eventually recognize my contributions. I thought surely when it came time to hand over the reins, he'd see that I was the right choice. Last week, my father called a family meeting. He announced that he's ready to step back from day-to-day operations. I held my breath, expecting him to finally acknowledge my hard work and name me as his successor. Instead, he said he's appointing Jake as the new manager. He praised Jake's fresh perspective and innovative thinking. He said the company needs new ideas to grow. I was stunned. I asked about my role going forward. My father said I could continue in my current position, reporting to Jake. He acted like this was a completely normal and reasonable decision. I lost it. I told him he was making a huge mistake. I pointed out all the times Jake's ideas had backfired. I reminded him of my years of dedication and hard work. I said he was betraying me and the promise he'd made about me taking over someday. My father got angry. He said I was proving his point about being too emotional and not having the right temper to lead. He said Jake was clearly the better choice because he stays calm and professional. My sister jumped in, telling me I was being selfish and should be happy for Jake. She said I should trust her father's judgment. Jake just sat there looking arrogant. I stormed out. Since then, I've been ignoring calls and texts from my family. I'm seriously considering quitting and starting my own competing business just to prove them wrong, but part of me wonders if I overreacted. Maybe I am too emotional. Maybe Jake really is more qualified and I'm blinded by jealousy. Our company makes specialized parts for local industries. I have a technical background in addition to my business degree, so I understand our products and processes in depth. Jake has no technical background. I've consistently improved our operations over the years. Our efficiency has increased by 30% under my leadership. Jake has never actually run a business or even a large department. His accounting work was mainly auditing and financial reporting. There have been rumors that Jake is looking to outsource some of our production to cut costs. This goes against my father's commitment to keeping jobs in our community, but he doesn't seem to believe me when I tell him my father has a history of being impressed by outsiders. He's always been swayed by fancy degrees and big company names. Growing up, he was often disappointed that I wasn't top of my class or captain of a sports team. My mother passed away when I was in college. Since then, my father has become even more critical and emotionally distant. I'm not married and don't have kids. My father has made comments about how Jake and my sister starting a family shows They're more settled and responsible. Looking back, I can see how the relationship between my father and me has been strained for years. When I was a kid, he was always pushing me to be the best. He'd enroll me in extra classes and sign me up for every activity he could think of. I tried my best to meet his expectations, but it never seemed to be enough. In high school, I was a good student and involved in several clubs. But instead of praise, my father would ask why I wasn't valedictorian or why I didn't make it to the state championships in my activities. When I got into a good state college, he questioned why it wasn't a more prestigious school. I chose to study engineering and business because I thought it would prepare me best to take over the family company. My father seemed pleased with this decision, but he still found ways to criticize. He'd compare me to the children of his business associates, always finding ways that they were doing better or achieving more. When I started working at the company full-time after college, I thought things would finally improve. I was eager to prove myself and make my father proud. I took on every task I could, often working late into the night, and on weekends I learned every aspect of the business from the shop floor to the office. But my father's criticism never stopped. If I made a successful deal, he'd say I could have gotten better terms. If I introduced a new efficiency measure, he asked why I hadn't thought of it sooner. It was exhausting and demoralizing, but I kept pushing myself, hoping that one day I'd finally earn his approval. When my sister introduced us to Jake, I was initially glad to have someone else to talk business with in the family. Jake was charming and confident, always ready with an anecdote from his accounting days or a theory from his MBA classes. I didn't see him as a threat at first. After all, I was the one who had been groomed to take over the business, but it quickly became clear that my father was obsessed with Jake. He'd invite Jake to important meetings, ask her his opinion on decisions, and praise him effusively for every suggestion. It was like watching the relationship I'd always wanted with my father play out between him and Jake. Instead, there were countless small incidents that added up over time. Once I spent weeks preparing a plan for updating our equipment. When I presented it to my father, he seemed unimpressed. But when Jake chimed in with a few general comments about role, my father acted like he just heard the most brilliant insights of his life. Another time, we were at a family dinner, and my father was talking about a problem we were having with one of our clients. I started to explain the solution I was working on, but my father cut me off mid-sentence to ask Jake what he thought. Jake gave a vague answer about customer relations, and my father nodded along like it was gospel. The incident with the product line expansion was particularly frustrating. I had done careful market research and cost analysis. My report clearly showed that the risks outweighed the potential benefits, but Jake, who had never even worked in manufacturing, confidently declared it was a great opportunity. My father didn't even finish reading my full report before deciding to go with Jake's recommendation when it obviously failed, costing the company a significant amount of money. I thought surely my father would see that he'd been wrong to trust Jake's judgment over mine, but instead he praised Jake for being bold and taking risks while criticizing me for not finding a way to make it work. The supplier negotiation was another slap in the face. I had spent months building a relationship with the supplier, understanding their costs and constraints, and carefully crafting a mutually beneficial deal. When Jake jumped in at the last minute and got a worse deal, I was confused that my father still saw it as a win. And then there was the product launch. I had led every aspect of it from initial concept to final production. It was a success, and I was excited to finally have something my father couldn't criticize. But at the launch event, he barely acknowledged my role. Instead, he had Jake give a speech taking credit for the vision behind the product. I was so angry I had to leave the room to avoid making a scene. Through all of this, my sister's unwavering support of Jake has been salt in the wound. We used to be close, and she knows how hard I've worked and how much our father's approval means to me. But ever since she married Jake, it's like she's forgotten all of that. She dismisses my frustrations and tells me I should be grateful for Jake's help. I've tried to talk to her about it, to explain how it feels to see Jake waltz in and get the recognition and approval I've spent my whole life working for, but she accuses me of being jealous and small-minded. She says I should be happy for her that her husband is so successful. It's like she doesn't even see me as her brother anymore, just as competition for Jake. That's why the family meeting last week felt like the final betrayal. I had held on to hope that when it really mattered, when it came time to choose a successor, my father would recognize everything I've done for the company. I thought he'd see through Jake's surface-level charm to the substance of what I bring to the table, and to be told I'd be reporting to Jake after a decade of being groomed to take over, after working my way up through every level of the company, I'm supposed to just accept being subordinate to someone who's never even run a business. I know I didn't handle it Well, my emotions get the better of me, and that probably just confirmed my father's opinion that I'm not level-headed enough to lead, but in that moment, all I could think about was the unfairness of it all. Every late night, every missed weekend, every sacrifice I've made for this company, all of it dismissed in favor of Jake's empty promises and shallow charm. Now, I'm at a crossroads. Part of me wants to quit, to walk away from all of it and start my own business to show them what they're missing, but another part of me still loves this company, still feels responsible for the employees who have worked alongside me all these years. I don't know if I can swallow my pride enough to work under Jake. The thought of watching him potentially run my family's legacy into the ground is almost unbearable, but the thought of walking away from everything I've worked for isn't much better. I'm angry, I'm hurt, and I'm lost. I don't know if I'm for blowing up at my father, or if I'm justified in my feelings of betrayal. All I know is that this feels like the end of everything I've worked for, and I don't know where to go from here. Update: it's been a year since I posted here, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support. Your comments helped me gain perspective and make some tough decisions. After the confrontation with my father, I decided I couldn't work under Jake. The thought of reporting to him and watching him potentially mismanage the company was too much to bear, so I resigned from the family business. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I felt it was necessary for my own mental health and professional growth. I found a job at another local manufacturing company. It was a horizontal move in terms of position, but it gave me the chance to learn about a different sector of the industry. The new environment was refreshing, my ideas were valued, and my experience was respected. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I kept minimal contact with my family during this time. My sister would occasionally reach out, but our conversations were strained. My father didn't contact me at all. I heard updates about the family business through the grapevine, but I tried not to dwell on it. Then, about a month ago, I got a call from an old colleague still working at my father's company. He told me there were rumors of financial irregularities the police were investigating, and Jake's name was at the center of it all. I was shocked. Despite our different is I never thought Jake would do anything illegal. My first thought was of my father. If Jake was involved in fraud, there was a good chance my father could be implicated too. Even if he was innocent, I knew I had to do something. Despite everything that had happened, I couldn't stand by and watch my father potentially go down for something he might not have done. I decided to hire a private investigator to look into the situation. The PI worked quickly and discreetly. Within a week, he came back with some startling information. Jay had indeed been cooking the books. He had been inflating profits, hiding losses, and even embezzling money from the company. The fraud had been going on for the last year. However, the most important piece of information was that my father appeared to be completely unaware of the fraud. The PI found no evidence that my father was involved or had any knowledge of Jake's actions. It seemed Jake had taken advantage of my father's trust and manipulated financial reports to keep him in the dark. With this information in hand, I knew I had to act fast. I hired a lawyer specializing in white-collar crime and arranged a meeting with my father. When I walked into his office, I could see the toll the situation had taken on him. He looked older, more worn. For a moment, all the old resentments faded away, and I just saw my dad looking lost and afraid. I explained what I had discovered and introduced him to the lawyer. At first, he was defensive, insisting that Jake would never do such a thing, but as we laid out the evidence, I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. With the help of the lawyer, my father cooperated fully with the investigation. He provided all the necessary documents and testified about his lack of involvement in the fraud. Jake was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. My sister was devastated. She alternated between defending Jake and lashing out at everyone else. I tried to be there for her, but it was difficult given our strained relationship. Throughout this ordeal, I worked closely with my father to understand the extent of the damage to the company. It was worse than we initially thought. Jake's actions had left the business in a precarious financial position. As we worked together to sort through the mess, my father and I began to rebuild our relationship. For the first time in years, he listened to my ideas without dismissing them. He even admitted that he had been wrong about Jake and about me. One evening, as we were going through some old files, my father turned to me with tears in his eyes. He apologized for not seeing my true value, for always pushing me aside in favor of outsiders. He said he had always been afraid of showing favoritism, of being accused of nepotism, and in doing so he had hurt the one person who truly cared about the company as much as he did. It was a breakthrough moment for us. We talked for hours, really talked in a way we hadn't since I was a kid. He shared his fears and insecurities about running the business, and I opened up about how his constant criticism had affected me as the legal proceedings against Jake continued. My father asked me to come back to the company. At first, I was hesitant. I had found a measure of peace in my new job away from the family drama. But as we discussed it, I realized this was an opportunity to rebuild not just the business but our relationship as well. I agreed to return, but on the condition that we would be equal partners. No more top-down management, no more dismissing each other's ideas. We would make decisions together, combining his experience with my fresh perspective. It's been a month since I returned to the family business. It hasn't been easy. The company's reputation took a hit from the scandal, and we've had to work hard to regain the trust of our clients and employees. There have been late nights and heated discussions as we figure out how to move forward, but for the first time I feel like my father and I are truly working together. He values my input and often defers to my judgment on technical matters. In turn, I've gained a new appreciation for his years of experience and business acumen. My sister is still struggling to come to terms with Jake's actions. She's filed for divorce and is in therapy. Our relationship is slowly improving as she begins to see how Jake had manipulated not just the business but our family dynamics as well. Looking back on the past year, I'm amazed at how much has changed. I went from feeling betrayed and undervalued to playing a crucial role in saving the family business and repairing my relationship with my father. I've learned a lot about forgiveness, both giving and receiving it. I've also learned that sometimes stepping away from a situation can give you the perspective needed to address it effectively. The road ahead won't be easy. We still have a lot of work to do to get the company back on solid footing. My father and I are still learning how to communicate and work together effectively, but for the first time in years, I'm excited about the future of our family business. To those who might be facing similar family business conflicts, I would say this: don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, but also be open to reconciliation. Sometimes it takes a crisis to bring people together and reveal the truth. Thank you again to everyone who offered advice on my original post. Your support gave me the courage to make tough decisions and ultimately to be there for my family when they needed me most. So Reddit, what do you think? Did I handle the situation well? Any advice for navigating the challenges ahead as we rebuild our business and our family relationships?